an afternoon session that's going to be interactive, a lot of fun, especially after our Get Out the Lead. And so we're now at the 1:20 hour. Oh, he's telling me I gotta go over here. Okay.
Right here.
Right here? Okay. So we have a few minutes before we start our afternoon session, and I just kind of want to get a feel from the room. What did you think about the morning session? You know, was it informative? What did you learn? Do you want to know more about how we can protect our children from lead and our pregnant moms? Because that's primarily our focus. Are you interested in the advocacy part, which is near and dear to my heart because I like making a lot of noise? And so let's just kind of, a little bit, let's have some engagement here. So who's going to start? Now, I don't mind calling on somebody. Great. Come on, y'all.
I just want to say that I think it was very informative, and I do thank you all for the invite. I am Stephanie Fair. I'm a teacher at the Berneta Head Start, and I just want to thank you all for the invite. And we do have one pregnant mom in the, I think it's just one. We do have one pregnant mom here, and I think it was very informative that she learned more about lead. And thank you all for the invite.
And how the lead can be passed through, you know, from your mom. So mom has to be careful how she's exposed and the exposures that she has to protect the baby, right? Because we want our babies to be healthy. So I don't know if you all remember when Tom was talking about in his presentation, and he talked about the lead in the applesauce. Yeah. That is real prominent in food, especially in spices. Like, you know, we know turmeric is real big because everybody is using turmeric now. For us in our culture, the turmeric is more for dealing with arthritic pain and everything like that. However, in other cultures, like Indian culture, they use a lot of turmeric. And we noticed that there's a lot of lead in turmeric. Also, toys, right? A lot of our toys, most of the toys that come into America come from China. China does not have the regulations that we have, and that's why it's so important that we build power and build movement so that we can make sure that our consumer products, right, are safe and are lead-free. And we do know that this administration has made some changes in the Consumer Protection Agency that is very, very critical to making sure that lead does not enter into those toys that come in from China and also other countries now, that those toys are lead-free. Right? So we see lead, it can be exposed in many, many, many different forms. You know, we focus primarily on paint, right? Especially window sills. Window sills are very, very, very important. We are later on going to be having some trainings around it in partnership with the Mississippi Department of Health. Tandra, I thought she was going to be here today, but she wasn't able to join us, around, lead dust. Dust is a big factor in lead. Lead harms. Right? And there is no safe level of lead. That's why we coined this initiative as Mississippi Zero Lead and Healthy Housing, because we want to zero it out. You know, also another thing, another area is on the occupational side, right? Where folks who work in environments like Modine, who work in environments, they can track that lead in their homes. There's another researcher, I can't remember her name right now, but she presented at our Mississippi Lead Advisory Council that is sponsored by the Mississippi Department of Health and Healthy Housing. That's another agency. They are the regulatory agencies. So we're going to learn who regulates this stuff. We're going to learn how to do analysis. That's what our next session is going to be about, how MCUP is working in partnership with the Environmental Innovation and Environmental Policy and Innovation Center. We're a small organization, so we don't have the capacity to do that in-depth research that needs to be done and systems analysis that needs to be done in order for us to see where the changes need to be made, see where we need to direct our advocacy. And I can't wait till we get to the training part when Brother Omar is going to talk more about the organizing and the advocacy part. But we need to know transparency is everything. Right? Transparency brings about change. And transparency empowers us so that we will be able to defend ourselves, defend our communities. Right? We need to know how the state of Mississippi is allocating resources. Are they doing it in a fair and just way? Right? So to make sure that our communities up in the Delta, our communities here in central Mississippi, even in the city of Jackson where I live, right? I know that there are, well, they've identified 18 wards, not 18 wards. They've identified 18 zip codes where there are lead in the pipes, right? Is this state putting the money in our communities? We're going to find out in this next session. So we're going to do a deep dive into what we call equity, that they don't want us to use that term anymore, equity, and they don't want us to use that term inclusion anymore. But we're going to center around equity and inclusion from a funding perspective. Are the funds coming in our communities that need to be, to help us to make our communities what? Healthy, thriving, and sustainable. That's our goal. So I saw where Denise Schmidt is signed in. Are you with us, Denise?
I sure am, and I can see you. Thank you to whoever turned the camera on, so I can see y'all there.
Oh, cool, good. Is Janet on yet?
I'm afraid Janet has had a family emergency, so you get me today.
Well,
And so it'll be a medium dive, but we're going to tee up a deeper dive at one of your follow-up webinars. But I can, I'm slotting in for Janet today.
okay, wonderful. So are we ready? Our next, this session is titled Get the Lead Out, Improving Mississippi Drinking Water Through Fair and Just Allocation of Funding. What does the data reveal? A look at Mississippi Department of Health drinking water policies, practices, and patterns in the distribution of state revolving funds. And initially, Janet Pritchard was going to be our presenter, but guess what? We got a bonus because I work very closely with Denise Schmidt. And Denise, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. We have a beautiful crowd today, and I am just so thrilled and enthused of the mix of participants that we have in the space, especially the parents. So we have parents, we have Head Start teachers, we have Head Start social workers, we have elected officials. So we've got a nice space that, a nice diverse participant in the space. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. And does somebody have our presentation? Otherwise, I can share my screen if that's what's required. I did send it over just a little while ago.
Okay, she sent it over. Okay, can you share your screen?
Let me just get myself oriented here in a minute on the slideshow. So are you all seeing my slideshow?
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much for having us here today. I know Janet's terribly disappointed that she didn't have a last minute emergency. So that was my lucky chance to come and talk to you all today. Really excited to hear about the folks who are in the call today. I personally am kind of sort of my public service heart from I owe to my public school teacher parents. So I'm really happy and delighted to hear there are teachers and educators in the audience. I also have spent some time as a local elected official, and so have a deep appreciation for all of the roles you hold, particularly in smaller and mid-sized communities. You're doing so many things and trying to juggle so many priorities. So when I see folks taking time out of their busy schedules to devote it to this important topic, it really, really makes my heart sing. So thank you for having me here. I'm going to go ahead and advance my slides and tell you just a little bit about who EPIC is and why we are so excited to work with Ms. Romona and y'all in the coalition. Our approach to making things, we're sort of a group of impatient folks that want to see progress happen faster. So we want to see better government policies and practices go faster. We want to see environmental and public health improvements happen faster. And we want to do that by delivering real solutions to communities. And how we do that, as Ramona mentioned, that we get kind of into the weedy, wonky data and research and policy analysis. So based on the data and what we're finding, we come up with policy recommendations. But really, our technical assistance is a chance for us to do, we have a team called the Funding Navigator, which is of course connected with Ms. Ramona, because we're like our boots on the ground in communities, helping folks figure out how to access funds for infrastructure. All of this work is really focused on finding financing for water infrastructure because we know how you pay for things really matters. It matters for equity and it matters for whether things are happening quickly enough. And then finally, just partnerships are key to what we're able to do. We can only go so far, and that's why thanks to our partners are able to, and we go humbly into these places. We know that you know Mississippi best. You know the policy levers to pull and the dynamics work. And excuse me, what we want to do is help shore you up with the data and research and policy analysis we're doing and help you connect you to those resources so you can make the change you want to see. Some work we're doing to that point about how we pay for things matters is we do a lot of education through the state revolving fund advocate forum. So if at the end of this presentation you are just itching to learn more, I would really strongly recommend connecting through them. We co-host that, and we have educational trainings. You can join a cohort of folks who are similarly interested and want to see change in their states and their local communities, and join them as part of a learning cohort. So it's sort of like it's sort of like going back to school again. There's some virtual elements, a little bit of homework, but it's really diving into thinking how decisions are made at the local level and the state level about water. We do have available free of charge on our website is they are the largest federal financial assistance program for water infrastructure in the country. And the dollars roll through the states, and their objective is to achieve health and environment protection objectives. We do know, and in Mississippi this is definitely the case, that there are other sources of funds that a lot of local governments, some of the elected officials in the room may be familiar with the USDA Rural Development Funds. You may have connected through CDBG HUD funds for water infrastructure. Those are also great options. And many times it's a good idea to stack a bunch of these options on top of each other in order to get access to the most funds. But what I'm really here to talk about today is that state revolving fund program. And how they fund it, so it's a combination of federal and state level sources. Congress makes appropriation and it rolls out to the state. And so then it's up to the state then to how those dollars get distributed. So the types of assistance that are available through the SRFs include loans. They're either at market, below market, or zero interest rates they're offered. There can be additional subsidies, which are usually in the form of grants or principal forgiveness. So it's a loan, but you don't have to pay back the principal on it. There are also some other a little bit more complicated mechanisms like refinancing existing debt obligations. The SRFs can pay for that. And then there's some insurance mechanisms and SRF debt obligation guarantees that can be used. I'll just come back to sort of the basic principles behind the revolving loans. They need to revolve in order to be available into the future. So for our children, our grandchildren, and everyone to benefit from these federal funds, they need to revolve. So at their heart, they are a loan program. And so what you will see is even if you are, say, a disadvantaged community that would qualify for grants or principal forgiveness, the state agency is still looking at you through the lens of a loan program. So there are requirements that any sort of grantor would be looking at in terms of financial viability and those kinds of things. So that's important to remember that even if you're getting a grant, this is still at its heart a loan program. And so how these funds roll out is EPA gets the dollars from that Congress appropriates. It rolls through the Environmental Protection Agency, and then they distribute them based on the states. The states get their allocations based on a reoccurring survey. So there'll be surveys that go out to various communities about what their infrastructure needs are. And so those help inform what Mississippi gets, say, versus Florida in terms of dollars in any given year. In Mississippi, with a small population, it tends to receive a bit more funds in that there's a small population and there's sort of a minimum amount that Congress has said we need at least a certain amount of dollars to roll to every single state. They want every single state to be able to take advantage. So in states, in order to distribute these monies and be empowered to distribute the monies, put out intended use plans. So you'll hear the term IUP used a lot. And these are the policies that govern how the SRF assistance rolls out. It is a 50-state kind of situation. This is that cooperative federalism thing we hear a lot about, and that is the rules in Mississippi may be very, very similar to those in Alabama, but they are not going to be the same because they're two different agencies with two different sets of priorities for their state. Then the other thing to take a look at is the project priority list shows which communities are the ones that are intended to receive those dollars in that given year. So that's the list of the projects that have requested the funding and rank highly enough that their priority system that's laid out in that IUP says they're supposed to get money that year. That doesn't always mean that the loan closes. That doesn't always mean that the project gets built. So important distinction to make. There might be some things permitting, or maybe the project costs go up so that the loan does not close. So then those dollars roll over to the next year, or perhaps to another project that is more ready to proceed. So here's an example of how some funds have been rolling out. There are base levels of funds available for these programs every year.
And then sometimes you have an extra infusion of money, like we had a number of years ago with the bipartisan infrastructure law or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Choose your acronym, Bill or IIJA. I heard when I was in DC that they refer to it as EJA, so I'm trying to adopt that in my lingo too, EJA. So here's where the total appropriated, that's what Congress is rolling down. And then it rolls to EPA. They get the dollars out the door to the states, and then those dollars result in projects. There is sort of a natural lag to these kinds of dollars rolling out. There's time required, there's a lot of processes involved. And so the total in projects, and there's time to close on the loans and time to build the projects. So, and different places are measuring things and capturing these pieces of the puzzle in different places, which makes it a little challenging to track, quite honestly. But this is an example of where that extra infusion of funds from the EJA are rolling out. So why do these SRFs matter? And so you've probably already gleaned it's kind of complex stuff. It's a sophisticated loan program. It's kind of wonky. Why do I need to be paying attention to it? And at the end of the day, it's simply a lot of money on the table, especially with EJA. Those dollars will continue to be implemented over the next couple of years. So there's still time to make an impact on how those dollars roll out. And furthermore, it is an opportunity to make sure that the money is directed to the places that need it the most. We'll talk a little bit later about where the SRFs are in terms of priorities for this administration and some of those prospects there. But at the end of the day, these funds are finite. We know they're not enough to take care of every need across the country. So all the more reason to make sure that the money gets directed to the places that need it the most. So now I'm going to cover what some of our findings have been in terms of how drinking water SRFs have rolled out in Mississippi down to the local level. It's based on some findings of work we've done looking back to kind of pre-EJA, so from a 5-year period going through 2020, what has been happening in Mississippi. And some of this work we've done in conjunction with our partners at PolicyLink. They too, if you're familiar with PolicyLink, believe that the people who are living in the places know best what the needs are and should have those relationships with their state to affect the change that we want to see in the world. So PolicyLink contracted with us at Epic to train a cohort from these 7 states to get involved in state revolving fund project analysis and do an evaluation of their IUPs and how they've rolled out. It was a very interesting project, and the findings came out, and you can see they were documented here earlier this year. And through those sets of findings, there were some key policy recommendations. So each state had a different cohort of people working to dig in. And in Mississippi, here were some of their findings. Some of the recommendations were there's a need to reform the eligibility criteria. And Mississippi's not the only place where we have seen this. We've come up with these recommendations in Great Lakes states and other states as well. But making sure that the criteria that you include for affordability results in more equitable distribution. A lot of times, particularly the elected officials in the audience may be familiar with hearing a lot about median household income as being a criteria for allotting principal forgiveness or grants and loans. But the median is just the midpoint of your income profile. It could be missing the fact that you have a fair percentage of the folks living in your community that are living at a much lower income level. And so it can result in some really skewed allocations of money if you're just looking at MHI. That's just one example. And then there are EJA resulted in a separate set aside and carve out just for lead service line replacement. So dollars that can go to conducting inventory so you get a better feeling for what this infrastructure is. So there's usually like a public side of the service line and then the privately owned end of the service line. It can take a lot to develop a full inventory because we're talking about buried infrastructure that's at least in part on private property. So that can be tricky. So having dollars to do that, having dollars to do outreach to folks, folks can just quite understandably not really want the government on their property digging things up and replacing some of their infrastructure. So doing outreach is key. And then finally, just dollars to go for those replacement plans. Digging things up, putting in new pipes is not cost free. So in this case, one of the recommendations was to use set-aside funds. So the SRFs come with a carve-out for where the state can use those funds to do outreach, to provide direct assistance to communities, to conduct these inventories. It can be very tricky business. So one of the recommendations is to make sure you're fully utilizing what the federal government has given you to provide that direct technical assistance. Oh, is there a question? Oh, I guess I just misheard. Sorry. Okay, principal forgiveness caps. So in many cases, a large city with a lot of lead service lines is going to really miss out if there's just this set cap on how much any one place can get. And if it's a city that has a high percentage of disadvantaged communities, you're really not getting the dollars to the place that needs it the most. So adjusting some of those caps is an important policy change that can help fix that issue. Public engagement across all of the programs of the SRF, so Clean Water, SRF, and the lead. There just needs to be more transparency and engagement through educational webinars and community workshops. Janet, who's not able to be on this call today, was describing to me, and we both are living in Wisconsin, and our Wisconsin drinking water, our SRF program does a really good job when they put out these complicated reports and programs of the intended use plans. This is how we intend to use this money. They will hold a webinar for folks so that to make sure that everybody understands within a comment period. And so they explain it in plain language, answer questions, and then that helps the folks that are planning to file comments to actually do it with a more complete understanding of what they're commenting on. So just more transparency and awareness is what the recommendation is. And then finally, doing some leveraging. There are state programs that invest part of the dollars they get from the federal government. And so that provides a lot more financial stability to the program going forward. So that was one of the recommendations for Mississippi, because they are not currently an SRF program that takes advantage of leveraging. Another piece of work that I know, and we were just delighted to see MCUP use this analysis and use it to file a comment period, despite having a really short turnaround and requirement. We were delighted to have these analyses used, not just in Mississippi, but also Alabama and Tennessee for some comment periods. And what the findings from there was we were looking at these 7 states and doing a deep dive statistical analysis. So what are they saying? It was a little, I joked with Daniel Goshen, who led this work, that it was when I was reviewing these 7 states, I was like popping the popcorn. It's like, I wonder how it's going to come out. I wonder how Mississippi is going to rank compared to Alabama, Oklahoma. So we have a couple key findings here from Mississippi, and that is that you have a lot of water systems here. I think it was the largest number of systems in the cohort of 7 states. But those very small systems are receiving the least amount of funding. So large systems represent a smaller share of the total systems, but they're overrepresented in terms of the number of funded systems. Then the other interesting finding was that the systems with very high poverty rates, those over 50%, are generally classified in those small categories. And none of those high poverty systems receive funding. In contrast, there were about just under 10%, but there were some multiple systems with very low poverty rates, regardless of size, that did receive funding. So when you talk about equity and how these funds are rolling out, that's a key point there. The other kind of curious thing was the health-based violations are not a strong predictor of whether a community gets funded. So under the Safe Drinking Water Act, there are like 90 some contaminants that a utility has to report on, and whether they're meeting the federal and state requirements. Those are supposed to be really where folks who struggle to maintain those water quality systems from a water quality standpoint, they're supposed to be getting more funding. And in this case, only 5 out of the 78 systems with reported health-based violations received the funding. Now, this is not saying that all those 78 applied, right? In fact, they may not have applied for SRF funding. So it's not necessarily how the state was looking at it, but at the end of the day, it's an issue if folks with health-based violations are not applying for a low-cost source of capital. And then just generally, it's kind of related to the first bullet point, but across all the years that we analyzed, as system size increases, the likelihood of receiving funding also increases. So that's kind of connected to the small system, large system finding. So how to stay informed on how we're paid for things in Mississippi? First and foremost, engage through this coalition. And I will say, again, I'll just really applaud MCUP for filing those comments. That is how you participate on the SRFs in Mississippi. That is how you get that conversation going with the state about how these funds are rolling out. And utilizing the resources at hand to file those comments, engaging through this coalition. And I think that I had heard, Ms. Romona, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were planning a series of deeper dives of SRF webinars, perhaps. We are, and Janet made sure I knew, like, we are happy to participate in that. And I'm sure ECTA will be a part of that future deep dive. And then coming soon, we are going to roll out our, as I mentioned previously, our drinking water trackers. Super excited to see that come online, because it's meant to have a boatload of information in it, but making it visually accessible and easier to understand. So that should be rolling out, I think, in the July timeframe is what we anticipate. And I'm very excited to say that Mississippi is one of the states in that cohort of 15 states we're doing that deep dive on. So now I'll just talk a little bit of what we touched on, the current state of affairs with these vital sources of dollars for the state revolving funds. We know repeatedly this survey results on the left there, that there is broad across the country support for continued investment in water infrastructure. We may disagree in a lot of things in this country, but it seems like everybody agrees that access to safe, reliable, clean water is a priority. So there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance here, right? The White House is proposing a huge, almost 90% reduction in the state revolving fund programs. I think there's a lot of anxiety over this. I mean, we think we look at it as like an opening salvo, right? I don't expect, given broad congressional support too. I sat at the Council Infrastructure Finance Authority's convening earlier this spring. They are the folks that run all the SRF programs, and the nominee for the head of the Office of Water at EPA is very pro SRF. And congressional hearings are showing a lot of support to perhaps re-up the EJA investment. So where this lands, there's a lot of uncertainty, I guess, is the bottom line. Hard to predict. But I think it's heartening to see that there's a lobbying group called Banner Public Affairs. Shortly after the announcement of the proposed budget came out, they were ready to go with these dollars here. Like, these investments deliver real returns. And so demonstrating that economic input and sort of talking about the prosperity and the public health benefits is going to be key. So I guess it's a long way to say that there's a need to advocate at the state level. And as as we see with a lot of things, we see a lot of things getting handed back to the states to take care of. There's a need to advocate there, but there's also a need to talk to our Congress people about maintaining the availability of these funds into the future, because they are making a real difference. We're part of a coalition that's called Save the SRFs. And we signed on to a letter that went to the head of appropriations for the House and Senate. The bottom line is the SRFs, the good news was earlier this year, the federal fiscal year funds, which got held up oddly last year, were approved, and they were approved at fiscal year 24 levels, which is really good news. But the bad news is for fiscal year 26, despite authorizing 6.5 billion, the White House has requested much less. And so there continues to be broad support, just continuing. I think you'll see a lot in the news about the difference that water investment and investment in water infrastructure has made. And I think that is my last slide. But happy to answer questions. And I know that at a future date, a deeper dive with Janet is a priority for us. But I am happy to answer questions or entertain the thoughts, take ideas, all of the above.
I have a question, and most of our participants have had to leave because moms have to pick up children. But one of the questions that I have is on the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure funding. That funding is, as far as we know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Denise, is that funding still intact, or has it been cut?
It is still intact. So those cuts that I showed on that last slide, those have to do with the base funding. And the bill funds, the EJA funds, those are on top of. And what's happening is, and what happens with a lot of SRFs, the allotment for that year, like in our tracking of funds, we find that it takes a while for some states to get the dollars out the door. So if, for example, Tennessee did not really get their lead dollars flowing out the door until about fiscal year 2025. So their dollars will be available longer into the future. Until those EJA funds are taken up. Other states, like New York State, got their programs stood up in 23 already, and they're seeing a heavy demand for the funds because it takes a while for local governments to understand that what's available, what's not available. Part of what we'll be doing is we can give you a clearer picture about Mississippi and how that's all rolling out once we've got that analysis out later this summer.
Yes, and
it's the base funds. It's the base funds that are really are being talked about and are in jeopardy right now. And of course, it would be lovely if it were a both hand thing, if we could maintain the base funds,
yes,
and if we could also get IIJA reauthorized. I've heard yes on one. I've heard the drinking water folks think that that's a long shot. I've heard the clean water folks say, hey, if we put it in with transportation, there's a shot at it. So speaking to your Congress people is important.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that really stood out and caught my attention was, okay, they're telling me to turn around, was the large water systems represent a smaller portion, but they're getting the largest amount of money, where the smaller water systems have a greater need, but they're getting the lesser amount of money. And that is just so evident, right? Now, I think where that may be an anomaly is in the city of Jackson, which is a larger city. But I'm looking forward to the deeper analysis so that we can see how the city of Jackson is faring. But just going off of what I'm seeing by living in the city of Jackson, we probably aren't getting our fair share either. So for our smaller communities, like the city of Grenada, like the town of Duck Hill, and those real small communities, it is just so important that the leadership and the elected officials understand, because many of these communities do not have public works directors, right? So they may not even know that these resources are available. And the ones who do know the resources are available, most of them probably do know the resources are available, but there is a capacity issue. The way that the way that they write the requirements, some of them they have to write them that way, but some of their policy requirements are actually prohibited of our small water systems actually even qualifying or being able to apply for those funds. So can you just speak to that just briefly?
Yes, that's a great point. It's like so many things in our country. It takes money to access the money. There's just kind of no way about it. And I think what the previous administration did was put a lot of investment into technical assistance. We are grateful to have been named a National Environmental Finance Center, for example. We also provide services through philanthropic support, which is, we're very grateful for that. And what that is we can go into a community at no cost to them, and help them develop a project, figure out their priorities, and then develop all these application materials, because the list can be really long and it can be really daunting. You have to have, again, it's a loan program, so you have to have, for example, 3 years of audits done and ready. So we can help connect them to people that can do that and then provide financing for that. And it's not just us. There's a whole ecosystem of technical assistance providers. We all kind of go at it a little bit differently and have slightly different offerings. But the state, in my opinion, the state should make y'all aware that resource is available. So there's help available to connect. But again, back to my earlier statement, we understand that there are so many priorities in small communities and people are playing like 10 different roles, and that they might not be ready to receive assistance. But I think the thing to note is we don't know how long these funds will be around. Taking advantage of them now and connecting quicker to the help and the dollars is really, really pretty key, because there's a chance of missing out on it. We don't see investment in water the way we do in roads and bridges. I heard somebody joke that should be one word, roads and bridges, because that's all we hear when we think of infrastructure. It's above ground. People see it. They get it. They're more willing to pay for it. And so we have this infusion of funds right now. It's really, we want to see people take advantage of it. But it does require some staff involvement or involvement at the local level in order to push it forward. So there are
So,
folks ready to help. Um,
so I know that when we started working together, right?
right.
I think we're going on our third year now. 30, is it third year? Time goes by
That's
fast.
right.
And at that time, that was when all of the bipartisan infrastructure bill monies were coming out, and EPIC wanted to really work with local communities in order to help build that capacity for them to be able to apply for the funds. And one of the barriers that I know that we ran into here in Mississippi was the local jurisdictions did not have those audits, and they didn't have current audits. So is there technical assistance available to help these small communities, small jurisdictions and water systems? Is there local technical assistance available to help them to get through and to become current with their audits?
Yes. So that is something that we, as an organization, have been helping out a lot with. That being said, some of those funds are getting pretty limited now, because it's not just actually conducting the audits. There's oftentimes a lot of bookkeeping and pre-audit work that needs to happen. So we are trying to, and I know EPA is very interested in the fact that we have been doing this. So we've been trying to message to them that this is like, they put out some contracts for folks to help with engineering services, for example. Then they put out another contract for folks to help with lead service line replacement. It would be great if they could put out a contract to help folks more broadly deal with the financial capacity and demonstration of financial capacity. At the same time, working on policies to say, what's sort of like the bare bones that you would need, the state would need to see in order to demonstrate financial capacity. It's totally understandable that they want to see that that an organization has the ability to manage its funding and financing into the future. It's just how persnickety does it need to be, right? And does it need to be audit level versus something else? So there's kind of a both and there. There are some, long way of answering your question. Yes, there is some TA available to help with that, but it is somewhat limited at this point in time.
Those funds that have been identified with those set-aside funds, I know that the Mississippi Department of Health, the analysis that you all have done so far, that preliminary analysis, that the Mississippi Department of Health, that they have the drinking water division, that they have those set-aside funds. And can those set-aside funds, which was what, $5 million and something, I can't remember offhand right now, but I know it was a substantial amount. Can those set-aside funds be used for capacity building, and as a part of that capacity building to help these local small water systems and very small water systems to be able to get their audits? Because I know that there are some small communities here that have not had an audit in like 10 years, right? Well, 10 years, that may take forever to try and go back. And I know one small community up in Holmes County, when the new mayor came in, the first thing she did was look to see what their audit looked like. Well, they hadn't been audited in 10 years. But there may be, and then I know of another small community that they haven't been audited in a number of years. So I don't know if Bill Mooney, if they know that these small communities, and I'm sure that they do, that what is keeping them from applying for these funds is because they do not have the audits. And they, at MML, the Mississippi Municipal League, when they have their conferences, they talk about these things that are needed, and the state auditor at the last year's MML conference, he just basically said, we're coming after you, right? But you're going to come after these small municipalities, but the state has funding that's sitting there, but those resources aren't being invested in a fair and a just way. So I can see that as an advocacy and a policy change or a systems change that our coalition can work on and can look into. And then when it comes down to the compliance on the lead and copper rule, you know, these small municipalities, they didn't even know that there was a pending deadline of October the 16th of last year, right? Is it their fault that they didn't know? Maybe it is, right? But who I point the finger at is the regulatory agency that is responsible for making sure that those inventories are there. They should have been working with these small municipalities. So I guarantee you, if we were to go back and if we were to do a look at, if we were to shine the light on those larger municipalities and water systems that are getting all of this money, the only reason they're getting this money is because they can meet the criteria. And look at them, they probably were in compliance, but Dakil wasn't in compliance. They're not in compliance now. Berneta isn't in compliance, right? So these small municipalities and water systems, they simply aren't in compliance. So when we attended, when Tracy Smith was still with Epic, and we attended the little one-day conference that they had in Vicksburg. I don't know if you remember that or not. I can't remember who it was that sponsored it, though. But one thing that Bill Mooney continued to talk about was the C word, consolidation, right? So I can see where it's going to lead to, and they start, and also talked a lot about the intergovernmental sharing, right? So what that suggests to me is they're going to starve these small communities out. They're going to say, okay, you're not able to comply with the lead and copper rule, so we're going to consolidate these water utilities and consolidate them into the larger water utilities. That's my conspiracy theory. I may be wrong, but
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniably hard to make a small utility pencil out. I think I'm getting a note that my internet connection's unstable. Hope you can all hear me. That it is difficult to get a small utility to pencil out to be able to provide affordable water. Your investments and your requirements are the same as a larger utilities in many, many ways, and you have fewer customers to spread the costs out over. Exactly. And so it is, some sort of regional approach is oftentimes a good solution, but there are lots of details and complexities involved. And I know that other states, and I can send you some work we did in partnership with the University of Maryland and the Penn Water Center about what we had seen. And it's a little over a year old now, but it was an example of what some states had been doing in order to help their communities get across the finish line with the inventory. So some states had hired contractors and they made them available at no cost to the community, and they hired them to go out for particularly small systems and help them complete their inventories. I think in my state, it was like a combination of contractors, and then they used some college students to help with canvassing. You can get creative with these things.
Yes.
It's just how much capacity building investments that particular state is doing versus what they could be doing.
Well, I think that's where we're going to be headed. We do have enough people that are still with us that when we think about in terms of what our vision is for the coalition and the direction that we want them, collective vision, where we want to go. But the first thing is educating, right, members of the community as to what this is all about and how critical it is, because none of us can do without water, right?
Yep,
None of us can do without water. We may be able to go a few days without food, Some of us probably need to go a few days without food. But one thing we cannot go without, and that is water, and that water needs to be clean water. And we need to get the lead out of our water. We need to get the lead out of Mississippi. Denise, thank you so much. I did not realize when we scheduled the coalition meeting for today, it totally escaped me that this is Memorial Day weekend, right?
It's so early this year.
And it's a long weekend, and I'm just so thrilled that people took time out of their day, right, to come and be here with us, our speakers, amazing speakers. And I just look so forward to continuing our work and our partnership with EPIC. And I want everyone to know that EPIC is one of the sponsors of today's event, so they made sure that we were able to have this. And so, any questions for Denise? Thank you. Thank you so
Well, I
much.
wish you all well with this next exciting session with Omar. And I hope everybody has a safe and wonderful weekend.
You too, dear. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So, Albert, how many people do we have online? Four. Laurel and Kate. Okay. So I know that session was kind of technical, wonky and everything, but that's what this work is, that we are embarking upon. And if we do not get the funds coming into our communities, then we are simply not going to be able to reach our goal of creating healthy, thriving, and sustainable communities, especially in our small rural areas. It's a challenge in all of our communities, to be truthful. So if it's a challenge in Jackson, a challenge in Memphis, a challenge in the larger cities, just think how much of a challenge it is in the small communities. And that's why I put my energy into the smaller rural areas, because rural communities, they don't get it. They don't get the resources coming in. And so we have to fight. We have to fight. We have to amplify our voices. So we have 4 people online, and we have a few of us. Can we all come together? Come closer. Brother Omar is going to be working closely with us. MCUP is contracting with him to work on our policy, mostly our policy work, and to take some of the load off of Chanel and I on the research side. So he will be coming to our quarterly meetings, but we are also going to be doing some intermittent training. So I'm going to turn it over to him. He had already put together some work sheets and everything like that, but folks had to leave, and it's kind of hard for folks online. I see Kimberly is with us. Hey, Kimberly. Kind of hard for folks online to see the work sheet. So I'm going to turn it over to Brother.
Can you drop the worksheet in the chat?
Can you drop it in the chat? Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks. Yes, I had to put my jacket on too, because it's cold.
Did you already email it to me?
Yes, it was part of the email with the PowerPoint. There it is right there. C2s. Yep.
I can print it on the screen.
All right, that's cool.
I'm gonna put it on the screen.
Okay, if you can put that in for me to advance the slides?
You don't have.
Can I do it from
You
there?
don't have you have PDFs.
Yeah.
Worksheet is
Yeah.
a PDF.
Yeah, the worksheet is PDF.
You can't advance a PDF.
Oh, okay.
Just tell me what you want me to show.
Okay. I'm talking about for the PowerPoint presentation, you can't? You still can't advance it?
Just give me 1 second to find it.
But I'm gonna go ahead and get started while Albert is getting things loaded up. But I appreciate you all. I know I have a difficult task because everyone has eaten. So when people kind of fall asleep. So I am going to try to make this as interesting and engaging and interactive as I can. Romona asked me to come on board and help with analyzing policy, some existing policy, developing public comments for the state funding, revolving funds for water infrastructure improvements. And that was one of the first tasks she assigned me to do. And when Romona reached out to me, she said, Omar, I have to have the comments in 2 weeks.
No, it wasn't 2 weeks.
What was it, a week?
It was on a Tuesday and
It was due on a Friday or something like that?
on Monday.
Yeah, it could have been. But it was a wild call that I got from Romona about needing these comments, public comments in, and it was a pretty quick turnaround. So I asked Romona, send me everything, that you have so that I can look at it and see if we can put some comments together to get them in, by 5 o'clock, I believe it was, on that date that it was due. So Romona sent the information in to me, and I looked at the report. The report that Epic put together was a really good, robust report. Made my job easy, right, of looking at the data, interpreting that data in a way where you can put together concise and appropriate comments based on what the community wanted to see come out of the revolving fund investment in their communities, right? And was able to work with Romona and work with Epic and get that package, right? That comment package in on behalf of the community so that information is into the state. Now, the part on us now that is on our shoulders is now to take that information that was put in the public comment document and make sure we create strategies around that public comment document and advocate now, right? We can't just let that sit, because if you don't have any action afterwards, right, that results in an outcome that the community wants, the state is not going to move on it. The health department is not going to move on. They say, these are some really good comments, some good points, some good statistics you all have, but if you don't push them and really keep their feet to the fire, right, they're not going to do anything. So part of that is a piece of it that we did today, education, right? Educating not only ourselves, but educating those folks in our family, educating those folks in our communities around why this is important. Why this is important. It is important because our health, right? We're taught that we have, right, important elements of what makes us humans. We have our intellect, we have our health, we have our age, and we have wealth, value that we bring into the world. Right? So you use those things while you have it, because at some point all of us are going to get older and we're going to lose that health, right? We're going to lose that youth to be able to be active. So now is the time while we have that health on our side, right? We get out and we advocate. We amplify the voice of the community. And one way that we do it is educating ourselves and then also building in this advocacy infrastructure that Romona is talking about doing. You all have already started this around the coalition building around this initiatives and many other initiatives. Okay, so Albert got the presentation up. My name is Omar Muhammad, and I am a consultant now. I used to run a nonprofit in the city of North Charleston around community revitalization. So I did a lot of this work as part of that organization. I am also a fishery biologist. I was a fishery biologist with the state of South Carolina for 19 years, and I did statistics. I did fishery management. So that's all I looked at for 19 years, was doing that research and understanding numbers and how to tell that story around numbers, and why certain decisions are being made based on those numbers. So that's why I was able to turn around that report fairly quickly to Romona, because I did that before. I am also a urban planner. I was a planner for the city of Charleston, both in zoning and in their rural community planning. I was the planner for their rural communities of James Island and Johns Island. So that's who I am. You can go to the next slide, Albert, and we'll get started. Okay, so the training objectives for today, and I'm just going to focus on the main one, and we will touch on those other two. So the main focus is to understand what are advocacy tools and how can we use that in our advocacy work, in our organization, work, in our coalition building work. And what will come out of the discussion that we're going to have today is that hopefully we will learn how to engage key stakeholders in this work, right? We have elected officials, we have community workers, we have essential workers, we have a lot of folks, right, that can become ambassadors, right? That's what we are hoping to build out of this, right? So they just don't see Ramona's face, right, Chanel's face, right, in the meetings. But all of you, all of us, become ambassadors for this initiative to remove lead from our water infrastructure, right? That impacts us all. And then hopefully we will learn, right, like what Epic shared with us today, about how to use data in the media to influence decision makers, right? There's nothing, when I first started this work, it was very frustrating to do this work, and you know that you're being harmed. Your community is being harmed. And you're telling stories, right? You're standing in front of the council, and you're telling stories about the harm that is happening in your community, and they just sit there and just stare at you, look at you, make no action, make no movement, right? Because what we're bringing to the table is emotions. We're bringing anecdotal stories, right? But as soon as we started packaging our comments around statistics, numbers, right, it changed the tide in the conversations they started having with us, right? So being able to use that data that was in the EPIC report to go to your decision makers and say, this is the reason why we need the change that we're asking for. Does it make sense? So that's hopefully what we'll get out of this training today. Next slide, Albert. So understanding some key advocacy tools. Some of these advocacy tools are not new. They have been around a while. They may be new to some of us, right? Because we never have used them before. But hopefully today, after today, we will have a good grounding and a good common understanding of these advocacy tools. Next slide. Yes. Infographics. No, that's good. You good. Okay. Infographics. So infographics is a great way to take a lot of information and put it on a 1-page or 2-page. You don't want, infographic really should be a 1-pager. one pager, with very little words, but mostly graphics, so that people can see. Because most of us, I'll be honest with you, we're visual learners. And if you hand a 5-page written report to someone, you condensed a heavy study of research, and you condense that to 5 pages, and you hand that to somebody, you think they're gonna read it? Nope. They will. You will see them roll that piece of paper up and put it in their back pocket, and they will never touch that paper again. But if you take that information, you put it in an infographic, right, where you have graphics, and you're visually telling the story around the research or the story around the information, that is what people more, they will be able to consume that and understand that, right? So you want to be able to take very complicated, complex information and put them into graphics. So, and I have the examples of that to be able to show us how we can use these tools in this work. Data dashboards, right? Again, data can be heavy. Statistics can be heavy. People don't like math. They don't like math. Although we deal with math every day, people just, when anything about math, it just turns them off. That's why we have a hard time with understanding budgets. We have a hard time understanding financing. We don't even talk about it, right? Because people just don't like numbers, right? And some of us, like myself, we love to look at numbers and look at those trends and look at what's happening with the information, right? So for the average consumer, average person, you need to package these numbers in a way that they can understand it. And a good way to not only do that as an infographic, but to present that information in a data dashboard, right? Which is a visualization tool that shows that information in a way that is digestible to them. So it could be a map, it could be charts and graphs that you show that information. And this is just, just one way. Webinars, we just had one, right? We're doing one today. Webinars are a great tool for training people, providing information to people, activating people's voice, giving them a platform to be able to share, right? To collaborate, to meet, to gather, to talk about issues and concerns, right? And webinars are a really great training apparatus to be able to train people, because that can be shared in many platforms. Resource Hub. And these are all things that Romona have been asking for, that her organization needs to be able to help people to understand the challenges, not only understand the challenges, but be able to take action, right? So Resource Hub. Resource Hub it could be a web-based, it could be a paper-based resource, a document that you can hand a community that lists out what resources are available on a particular challenge in their communities, right? Or it could be a web-based a platform that allows people to be able to go onto this website and be able to, which we are planning and working with Romona on developing out each of these tools. Each of these tools that we're talking about today, we will be working with not only Romona, but with you all in developing and shaping these tools for eventually being able to impact policy. Because at the end of the day, that is what is going to shift what is happening in our communities. Is policy. Policy drives everything. Policy drives decision-making. Policy drives where funding goes. Policy drives what is priority. Policy. So it all goes back to policy. So when you can impact policy, it is not enough to stand before your council and say, this is harming me, but also be able to present a policy framework to say, not only is it harming me, but we have thought about a potential solution that we would like to present to you and work towards it together, right? Because this work cannot be done in isolation. I think what was the young lady's name? The one that spoke before me, Denise. I think Denise said it, right? For the complicated, for natural commitment that is required for smaller systems, for smaller systems, it's going to have to be a regional approach where maybe perhaps these smaller systems get together. Maybe get together with you have a council of governments right here in this area. Get with your council of government and work with them on a strategy and plan on how these smaller systems can work together and pull resources together and manage their water infrastructure challenges. Right? Right, Romona?
Absolutely, and in Mississippi, we really don't have the Council of Governments, right? They have a planning, it's regional planning and development districts. Like for this area, it's North Central Regional Development and Planning District. So I don't know if, I'm still trying to figure out what is the best. Is it going to be, it's a council of government, which I would prefer more so than the region, but they're like the MPOs.
Okay, cool. So it functions about the same, right? They provide technical assistance, planning assistance for smaller jurisdictions, right? That do not have the staffing capacity or the resources to be able to have a dedicated person to do this on behalf of that jurisdiction.
And there
Right?
is non-entitlement.
That is correct. That is correct. The,
Also, it's a little different in Mississippi how CDBG funds are used for how CDBG funds are used at the smaller communities level. Used to be for small cities, remember?
yep.
But it's definitely an area that is calling for reform. Yes.
You identify your issues and you prioritize them. And you say you rank them based on what is most important. And you tackle that list that you prioritize, you tackle that. And you work yourself down. Right? It can be frustrating. It will be frustrating. But it may take you 10 years. But it's okay. You'll get there. Right? Someone told me when I started this work that this is not a race. This work is not a race. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint. So you have to be patient. You have to keep at it. What should motivate us doing this work? And I think all of us know this because we're in community development improvement work. It's not the money. Because there's little money that supports this. What drives most of us in community development work that's on the ground doing this is that we want to see change. We want to see quality of life improvement. We want to see that generation that is coming behind us having it better than we have. Right? That's what drives us. It has to be something that keeps you in this work. Because if it's not those values, and if money is the only driver, you're not going to last very long in this work because there's no rainbow, right? From a money financial standpoint, there's no rainbow at the end. There's no gold pot at the end of this rainbow. Right? There's joy, happiness, and fulfillment. So that's what has to drive us when we are doing this work. And I think many of us, we already know that. So this is the part of the uh, conversation that I like to call collective conversation. Collective conversation. And if we had a bigger group, we would break out into the groups and we would have a conversation around the worksheet. Albert, were you able to get that posted in the chat? Okay. Okay, that's right. You're gonna bring it up on the screen. Okay. So we're just gonna have a collective conversation around those key advocacy tools that we talked about, and just answer some of these questions that are on this worksheet. And each one of you can take this worksheet with you. We got plenty printed. So if you want to take some additional ones back to your community, you can do this activity with your community group or whomever you want to do this with. But this worksheet is designed for all of us to think about each one of these advocacy tools and how we can apply it to a current challenge. Yes, ma'am.
For folks who are online, if they want copies, just drop their name into the chat, and then we'll make sure that in email.
That's cool.
Get it out there.
That's cool. So Ramona is reminding me that the folks that are online, if you would like a copy of the worksheet, drop your email into the chat, and Albert would make sure, and Ramona would make sure that you get a copy of the worksheet to be able to do this, complete this worksheet at a later date or time. Okay. So the first advocacy tool that we're going to talk about is the infographic. So when you're thinking about an infographic, how we describe that infographic, taking a very complex set of information, it could be how do we want to communicate this challenge to the community. I use infographics when I'm talking with communities about climate change. Climate change is a very hard concept for folks to perceive, right, and to get. So you have to be sensitive, culturally sensitive, language sensitive, about how you're presenting that information to the community, because you want everyone to walk away with some sense of, I get this. So infographic is a very good tool. We're taking very complex ideas, data sets, and being able to communicate that in a way to the community or to whomever you're trying to communicate. We use infographics a lot. We're talking with our legislature delegation. Because sitting there and talking with them about a challenge in a community, it's going in one ear out the other, because 15 minutes later from now, they got to talk with another group of people. Or they got another constituent sitting out, outside their door that they need to talk to. So what you're saying is going in one ear out the other. But what we hand them, boom, we hand them an infographic that describes in not only in terms, but in pictures, in graphs, in other visual information that they can just take a look at and say, oh yeah, this does present a challenge to the community. So in your community, in Duck Hill, what challenge in Duck Hill do you see an infographic, right, being used in Duck Hill? No?
I would say in every capacity.
In every capacity?
Every capacity, because really and truly, people's mindset is not where it's supposed to be.
I understand.
Basically, and I tell you, our people in Duck Hill need to listen to Jasmine Crockett, the senator, because really and truly, when she go at somebody, let me rephrase that. When somebody come at her, when somebody come at Jasmine, she does not react, she interact, because of the fact all the information that they given to her, she let her mind compile it, and then she speak on what they have already said. Just like J.D. Van, told, replied and told her she ghetto, and she let him, making it short, she let him know that's your way of trying to hold me down.
Sure.
Because you don't want me to speak my mind. You don't want me to say what I have to say.
I understand.
And that's the way that's pretty near how you have to deal with certain
I understand. So what was just shared is that infographics for the example used in Duck Hill, it can be used for every aspect of development in Duck Hill or improvement, community development improvement in Duck Hill. I remember the first time I came to Duck Hill, you all were describing to me the challenges, right? And you were saying, well, we don't have zoning ordinance. I said, well, why, how can you develop a community without, kind of like policy dictating or putting up guardrails or guiding your decision, right? Then you all were saying, we had an opportunity to revitalize a school that had, you told me that the tree was growing in the middle of the building and through the roof, right? And it's still growing. And you all described that that the community identified funding that would come revitalize the building and put it to a different use, basically an adaptive reuse for the existing structure. And that the mayor, I believe it was, or the town administrator, could not see the vision, and did not do anything or move in a direction or facilitate that funding coming to the community to be able to revitalize a building, to be able to train folk, to be able to host different events in the community, to be able to provide community space, etc. So he couldn't buy into the vision, but still don't see the vision. But an infographic, right? Using an infographic to be able to translate for him the dollar amount of investment that you could use in that building and the return of investment that will come to Duck Hill from that initial investment. And you'll be able to put that into numbers, graphics, so that the local decision makers, the town council, the mayor, town administrator, can see that information and then be able to say, oh, now I see it. Because some people, you can tell them all day, but they just cannot perceive it. So you have to put it on paper so they have, something they can touch and look at. So that would be a good use of an infographic, right? Chanel is inviting me back to Duck Hill to do that work, right? So that is one way that you could use an infographic, right? To be able to change the perception or change the understanding or change the mindset. I heard you say mindset, right? Change the mindset of where there's hurdles, where there are challenges. And there's other ways that you can use infographics too. Infographic is a really good way to communicate with the media, right? If you have an oppressor, if you're having you're hosting an event, you have an infographic that you can just pass to the media, right? And they can display that, feature that in an article, write a whole story around that infographic, right? Of what MCUP is trying to achieve, not only in Duck Hill, but in rural communities in Mississippi, right? That could be a model, right? What MCUP is doing can be a model for other rural communities in this region. In this region, right? So infographics is a great tool for being able to communicate what you want people to walk away with.
And EPA, they featured the seeds model in an infographic.
Yep.
And we have gotten, oh, they can't hear me, I'm sorry. But we've gotten, that's what really, when EPA featured the seeds initiative in an infographic, that is what really propelled the work to the national level, right? And that's when we started getting inquiries from all across the country wanting to know more about the seeds model, right? And it was from that infographic that EPA featured what they did for us, and also featured in their it's called the carousel of news or something like that. But the infographics are very powerful. In fact, gonna be working on them.
Yes, that is correct. So for part of this, like I was saying when I open up, these advocacy tools that we are talking about, we plan to work with MCUP and this coalition in developing these tools, so that as you are doing this work, right, you not only become ambassadors, but you are really trying to get those folks, right, those younger people, right, like these 4 young ladies, to become ambassadors, right? We're training them up to pick up the banner, right? I heard, I don't know if you know Dr. McLean, you know Dr. McLean, but Dr. McLean, she says this about the young people wanting to take the torch, of moving the movement. She said, no, this is my torch. This is my torch. What I can do is that you get your torch and I will light your torch from the light that I'm carrying, right? So that's what we're talking about. Pouring from ourselves, from our experience, from our lived experience, right? Pouring from ourselves into our young people so that they can continue to carry the torch, right? Not pass the torch on, but continue to build upon, make it better, right? Because these young people, they have access to information that we could never grasp, right? I was working with a young lady on her thesis project, and it was in the community, and we were trying to demonstrate to the local decision makers that a sound wall that they put up to address one problem, right, the sound off the roadway into the community, put up a sound wall. The sound wall that they put up to address one problem created another problem, flooding, right, created another problem. So it was hard to communicate not only to the Department of Transportation, but the city, everyone about this wall has created additional challenges in the community. So we didn't know, we tried everything. We tried infographics, we tried story maps, we tried all kind of things to try to get them to understand that this was a challenge that was created by this sound wall. And this student, she said, Omar, we have to look at the elevation around, the changes in elevation in the community. That's how you're going to, and I said, well, how are we going to do that? She said, we'll just fly a drone over the community and tape. I say, what? What?
Wow, man. Oh.
So students from the College of Charleston flew a drone over. I would have never thought of that as a potential, solution to this challenge that we were facing, communicating this to local decision makers. So she flew the drone over the community and mapped the elevation of the community and was able to demonstrate, yes, because of the sound wall, the elevation changed in the community, which contributes to the increased flooding that the community is now experiencing.
Just like our former former first lady, former, two, Michelle Obama.
Yes.
She said, when you go low, we go high.
Yes, yes, yes.
Wow, man. Okay.
So that's what I mean about having, as part of your advocacy work, it can't just be all us gray haired folks sitting up in here, right? It have to be some young people because they have solutions and access to technology that we are not even thinking about. That can change the conversation in your community. And because of this young lady thinking about flying a drone and mapping the elevation of the community, that changed the way that we were able to communicate with the decision maker. Because why? Now we had a visual that actually showed the elevation changed. Right? Before we couldn't, we were talking about it, taking pictures, showing the flooding, videos. You know, there was a photo voice project that we did, you know, in the community around the flooding. It makes a difference, right? It gets their attention. In this situation, it did, yeah, it did. But you have to keep at it, right? We could have gave up because the infographic didn't work. We could have gave up because the meeting with the sustainability officer at the city didn't work. Everybody passing the buck and saying, oh, no, this is not our infrastructure. You need to talk with the county. The county tell you, no, this ain't ours. You need to talk with the state, right? So they passed the buck, right? But the community kept at it, and we just kept pushing, and we kept looking at how can we tell this story better, right? So just trying different advocacy tools and see what sticks, see what works. So that is one instance of using infographics where it worked, and then a potential solution for Duck Hill, how an infographic could be used to be able to tell the story around why investing in this adaptive reuse of the old school building is important for the revitalization of the Duck Hill community. No, y'all talked about it. I could visualize what you all were talking about.
We've chosen by EPA, of course, you know.
I remember.
Always submit.
Yeah.
And we did get the technical assistance, and we now have the drawings, the concept, and we also went to the next stage and was provided with the technical assistance to put the financing strategy together.
Okay, cool.
Right? So we got those pieces that I need to make sure we get to you.
Okay.
And again, it all has been on hold because of the decision maker.
Understand. And I'd be glad to help think through, you know, how you could take that information. Well, I don't know about me flying the drone, but I'm pretty sure Jackson State has somebody that can fly a drone over. Do you know Joan, Dr. Joan Watney? Okay. She also used a similar method with her students. She's a planner. She taught planning at Jackson State. She retired. But her and her students would do work in communities, and they would fly drones to map communities. So she could be someone that we can definitely pull into this conversation around that.
Jones, the consultant on the TikTok.
Okay, cool.
But you know, the TikToks are.
I know.
But anyway, she's still assessing.
Okay, cool. That's great. So we will, we can have some more conversations about, you know, that infrastructure, what that can look like. Data dashboards. How do you all think a data dashboard can be used in the community you're in? But what you said, I'm sorry, I didn't. By working together and working as a team and collaborating, exactly. Being able to pull the information that you need into a resource right? And Romona is thinking that MCUP website, right, can be that data resource hub for this work, for the communities here that are participating in this work. I can give you an example on how we use a data dashboard to get a impact that the community wanted, to achieve an impact that the community wanted. The community was seeking, how can I? The city of Charleston, right, has and I think this is true of most communities. Planning, zoning, in the past have contributed to the inequities that communities experience. Where parks are, where biking infrastructure is, where there's sidewalks, all of that is what industry is located where it's sited, right? So the city of Charleston wanted to understand, because the zoning ordinances in city of Charleston was not changed. It's a antiquated piece of policy. It was developed in the 1920s and have not been updated since. It was amended, right? There was amendments to it, but it was hashpot. It was just pieced together, right? So you had elements of the policy conflicting with each other. So the city wanted to understand better the role that zoning, the role that planning played in some of the inequities that existed in the city of Charleston. So one of the things the city did was create this data dashboard to look at the data, look at the information. And what it showed, yes, ma'am. Yep, so there's data sets out there that you can pull into very sophisticated statistical. So the one that we used was ArcGIS. So you can pull data sets into a mapping software, right? It does a little bit more than just mapping, but it analyzes data as well. But the reason why the city wanted to analyze this data, they wanted to map it, so they needed to visualize it. So they pulled in old zoning ordinances, zoning maps that actually showed. Now this was the interesting thing. Some of the old zoning maps actually showed that it was the way that the community is, the demographics is today, is intentional. It was intentional. So some of those old zoning maps, actually, the ordinance were designed in a way to not only redline, but to displace African Americans, black and brown folk from the city. And how they did that was infrastructure. Where do you put parks? Where do you put certain infrastructure that support quality of life?
Where do you take down trees?
All of that. So how we were able to visualize that was we put in those old maps, right? So we have City of Charleston has a really good mapping team, and they have archivists. That is their job, is to look at this old stuff and be able to digitize it. So they were able to pull these old maps that they had archived. No one has asked this question before, right? And they were able to digitize these old maps, and we were able to pull them into the GIS system and overlay them with current zoning, overlay them with what is sited where are all these hotels going, where are the parks, where's the green infrastructure, all of this stuff we was able to zone. And what we saw was not only did the challenges, right, when we talk about environmental justice, when we talk about low wealth communities, right, when you overlay those maps, you saw a heavy concentration in where they did not want to put parks, where they did not want to invest into sidewalks, where they intentionally ran roadways through green space, through low wealth communities, right? So once we were able to map that, it became very apparent to people who were not so receptive to conversations around this, but being able to now visualize and have it lived on a dashboard where it was publicly accessible. And then that got people roused up right to the point where the city had to put something out, right, addressing that. No, we're coming up with policies to be able now to address the inequities in affordable housing, the inequities in where parks are located, right? The city had to address it because it was glaring. It was glaring around that. But that's what a data dashboard did when you can pull in information and visualize it. Yes, ma'am.
So the information was already somewhere else, so all you had to do is digitize.
That is correct. That is correct.
Because I know at home, and I've been trying to visualize how this can happen. Whereas, cemetery.
Yep.
They wanted
Yep.
right out through the square. But at this point,
Yep.
nobody has done it. So,
Yep.
So do they do a drone, or do they do it with a helicopter?
Yeah.
It has to be somebody that can fly over
So to
and
do
fly it out.
So
Yeah.
what community do you live in?
I live in Coldwater, Take County.
In Coldwater.
So the question was, I'm gonna do this for the benefit of the folks that are online. The question was, the challenge was, how do we map a potential cemetery that may the older members of the community know where it is. There has been development, right? There has been development that may have impacted maybe the boundaries of the cemetery. And how do we now take that old information? It may be stories, it may be old maps that may be sitting in someone's home. How do we now take that? No maps. It's not. It's all oral. Okay, so it's oral. I got it. So it is information that people possess that now needs to be documented and need to be mapped.
Okay, I was gonna ask, are there headstones?
For the most, because see now what they're doing is, if the family don't put a
Marker.
tombstone on, they just gonna charge a certain amount and mark their grave. So
Right.
they know who's waiting.
Okay.
Right.
If the graves are being marked, you can digitize that as they're being marked.
Yeah.
Okay, but you have to put it in the system yourself, right? You have to.
No, there are ways that you can pull that information in without that's too manual. It would.
That's what I was trying to figure out. How did you digitize that?
Yeah, so you can collect that information as best as you can. If you know how to get that into a spreadsheet or something like that. But let me talk with you later about how a strategy in which you can get that done, because that was another project that we worked on in the city of Charleston. Not only the city of Charleston, but the county of Charleston came on board too, because they wanted to preserve black cemeteries. They were being lost to developments, right? Developers would come in, buy a piece of land, the community would say, well, my family burial ground is here. And the developer would cover it up. They would cover it up, and they would lose access to, their family burial areas.
Talk about it, after you get to talk about digitizing
Yeah, I would even suggest you go to your local academic institutions, Jackson State, University of Mississippi, and you can ask. Many of them have like libraries or history, and you can ask those folks. We need help documenting our family cemetery. They will have resources to be able to, yeah. But most academic libraries have a archive history room. And you can go to those librarians and ask them for assistance, maybe genealogy assistance in helping you to document that work. I don't know. This is really, I mean, that can really become an oral history project where you take that information from the living folks that are in your family, document that, and then begin to then take that information and digitize it in a way where it can be visually documented or visually.
I can visualize it being like, you have seats in an airplane that you,
Yeah.
that you know, you pick a
Yeah.
seat that's vacant, you know what I'm saying? Okay,
Yeah.
but he wanted to tell me something.
Yeah.
When I was 5, 7, 10 years ago, we did community outreach projects. We don't have that project anymore, but we trained the community on how to use GPS technology
Yep.
and geolocation
Yep.
cameras to be able to do it.
Exactly
Something
that.
simple.
Yeah. So Albert probably would be a good resource for you as well. He has worked on a similar project and may have some contacts that you can at Jackson State.
Training, I could probably give them training, but I don't have any contacts anymore. The lab that was the visualization lab is no longer.
Oh, no longer at Jackson State. There could be other resources that you can tap into.
Maybe.
Yeah. So it's just going to be a little bit digging.
So a community college wouldn't be able to.
Probably not.
It could be trained, but probably Ole Miss, because you're in
Right.
Coldwater,
Ole Miss is a location in DeSoto County as well as,
in DeSoto County.
as well as in Oxford.
Which you close? You close to Oxford,
I'm closer to DeSoto County.
DeSoto County.
Okay.
We can talk more about it. I got some ideas for you.
Yeah. It's a good project. I mean,
Like I said, if I knew how to do it, I would.
yeah. So examples of how you can use a data dashboard to be able to
And then all you do is pull it up and say, okay, this is what the vacant frames are.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So you all already have an example of a webinar. We've been sitting in one today. So we don't have to talk about, a webinar, how you could use that as an advocacy tool. Resource hub. How would you all envision a resource hub? Would you want it to be a web-based resource hub, or do you want this to be a paper-based resource hub where you can just hand this document to someone? Now, think of this resource hub as being information that addresses the challenges that the community faces. Like, for example, in the city of North Charleston, we did a vulnerability assessment of the city of North Charleston. And there was a host of different challenges that came out of that vulnerability assessment. And people were asking, well, where are the resources to be able to address these vulnerabilities that you all have identified? So what we developed was a resource. We didn't call it a resource hub, but we called it a resource compendium, which then is just a document. It was a pretty thick page. It was like 45 pages of just resources that the community then, that information was put in every community center. Every community center. So when someone say, I need a roof replaced, they can go to the community center and look in that resource document and be able to find the resources that they need. Or someone will say, I need a handicap ramp. Who can I turn to be able to install a handicap ramp? Or I need transportation to my doctor. Right? What services are out there to do that? So that was a resource hub that we created, right? A resource document we created that was distributed into the community. But I would like to ask you all, how do you want your resource hub developed? Do you want it to be web-based, or you want this to be a paper-based resource document? You want both? You want both. You want it to live on the web, and you want something that can be printed out. Okay. That's something that we can definitely do. And then that can live in your community centers. It can live in the library where people can access it, at various, it has to be, we have to do it in a way where it can be updated, right? Because some of that information will definitely get dated.
Most of the here communities, most of the retired people,
I understand.
everybody not.
I get it. That makes perfect sense to me. So we will do a resource hub that can live on MCUP's website, and we will also have a printed version of that resource document that can be distributed in the community as you all see fit. Okay, cool. And then advocacy and policy toolkit. That was one thing that Romona, in our conversation, she kept mentioning the need for advocacy, the need for coalition building. So we want to put together a resource toolkit so that when you walk away from this project, you actually have a step-by-step process that outlines for you how you can replicate what is being done here in your respective communities, right? You can replicate it. And the best way to do that is that you create a toolkit that people can access and be able to take to their community and replicate. Does that make sense to you all? Is there anything else that we're missing from this set of advocacy tools that you think that you're going to need to be able to make your job easy? For the young people, what did we miss? Is there any tools or solutions out there that we're not thinking about? Technology? Social media. Probably in another 5 years, they won't be using TikTok. It'll be something totally different, right? It's probably something totally different now that we don't even know. We don't even know about. Instagram. Yep, Twitter. Let me ask, even the young people may know. Well, I don't know if they use Facebook like that, but the older people do. So Facebook, all social media, right? The role of AI. I know those young people know about this. Chat, GTP, there's other ones out there. How do you see the role of AI playing in this work?
To me, I find it very much helpful.
Okay.
Like, since I'm in school, and also kind of like if I'm stuck on a question, I can actually go to ChatGPT or go to Question AI and get assistance. But it's just like kind of break it down. Some of it ain't too good of giving out good information.
I understand.
But it's still good though. Like I just don't kind of too much trust it, like actually like going very wrong.
Yeah.
But still good for
with AI for me as being not an older person, but a young adult,
Yeah.
AI is really good at breaking it down.
I understand.
So, like how y'all be having a conversation about the lead and stuff like that, AI will break it down in layman terms for us to understand.
I get it.
And when it's broken down, it's like, oh, so that's what they've been talking about this whole time.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
now
Right.
I
I get it.
All right, and then we'll be able to take it to other kids, and they'll be able to tell their parents, and it's just an ongoing cycle.
Yep.
So that's how I feel like AI, social media, stuff like that. I feel like if we had people in the the level with the board and everything to break it down to the kids so
Mm-hmm.
they'll understand, then everybody be in it together.
I got you. So for the people who are online, I just want to recap what the two of you. Great comments. It was shared about the question was asked to them. How do they see? And when I say they, the young people. How do the young people see AI playing a role in this advocacy work? And it was shared that AI makes what we are talking about in this space, that's high level, that's over their head, it makes it more understandable to them. So AI breaks it down in a way when they can plug in those terms, when they can plug in the process that we're talking about into AI, it helps them to better understand the process. Right? So that's how some of the young folks want to use AI in this work. When we're talking about advocacy, when we're talking about the different challenges in the community, then they're able to use AI to break that down into simple terms for them to be able to now take to their peers and be able to share it in a broader perspective. They also talked about social media, being able to use social media as an outreach mechanism to be able to reach those younger people who can't be in this space for various reasons. It was also shared, hey, we can't forget about the old people. Old people is on Facebook, so we're going to use Facebook, right? Use those kind of, social media vehicles that maybe the young people are not, they have moved away from, but, we are now embracing as older people. Still use those platforms to get the information out so that we are reaching as many folks as we can in the community, not only with people who are old tech, right? I call it old tech, and people who are new tech. And then Chanel brought out an excellent point about, although we're talking about developing these tools, Romona, that's going to live on MCUP's website, we also need to think about being equitable in how that information is accessible. So also making a paper version, right, of that information, because the community may be older, the community may not have access to technology. So being able to produce some document that we can distribute in the community to allow as many folks as we can to have access to the information.
We can also replicate the comprehensive communications plan
Okay.
that the Columbia University students developed for us and for the three communities that we worked with in Jackson.
Okay, cool. So Romona mentioned about the, and this is just for the benefits of the folk that is online. Romona mentioned the communication plan that a group of students with the One Vision, three communities, one common agenda initiative. They came up with a communications plan, and Romona wants to see what elements, what aspects of that plan could be pulled into this work and lifted up as we move forward with this initiative. Sure. Yep. Yep.
Also, we have, they also developed a problem tree.
A problem tree. A decision tree or something? Was it? Okay.
Of course, the work was around flooding.
Okay.
But the problem tree looked at
Root causes. Okay.
the root causes, the effects of it,
Yeah.
and then the solution and the recommendations for solutions.
Okay, cool. You think that'll be a good infographic? It is an infographic. Okay, cool. Cool.
But we could definitely use that to just transfer it over to MED, because at some point, we're going to be doing some mapping.
Yep.
We did work with EPA, Region 4. But we had a work with an
Uh-huh.
And he did an amazing job of using GIS mapping and went back to the 1930s.
Yep.
And looked at the communities, looking at it through the lens of red line.
Yep. Understand.
And how
Yep.
the red line, these communities, and
Yep.
the communities in Jackson and the west end.
Yep.
I mean, on the west side. And then overlaid that with today and the homes that are impacted with lead.
Yep.
Today, and they're one and the same.
Yep. The perfect overlay.
Perfect overlay.
Yep. Yep. I get it. I get it.
can see where we can use those kind of tools to even be able to create that dashboard.
Yep.
Where people will be able to go in and visualize in the different communities, like this sister lives up in
Yep.
Coolwater. Coolwater. Coldwater, here at 55. It's up 55. Okay, Coldwater. But the same issue is in Duckhill.
Yep.
It's wherever there are properties that were built before 1970.
Understand. Understand. Yeah.
So we could easily.
So yes, we can. We can definitely make this a student project,
We can make it a.
and because you're gonna need some,
Absolutely.
resources to be able to map those communities and create those types of maps that you want to create there. And the best way to do it that is not resource, kind of it eats away a lot of your resources is to use student interns. Students are great. They get to learn, you get a product, so it is definitely
I was just about to say, and the reason why I say that is because the kids want to be involved.
I know, yeah.
But because the community is so stuck on the board being just older people,
I understand.
then your children are not involved. You get what I'm saying?
I get it,
If we
yep.
had youth advocates on the board and they're able to be like get the policies and everything broken down,
I understand.
and then it be in layman terms for them, or have workshops where they know, okay, we got this going on, lead is going on, and they looking like, what is lead? What is
Yeah, yeah,
lead?
yeah,
What-
yeah.
And you get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
you got that sense of not having communication for the kids.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
And
does.
they want to be hands-on, they want to be able to speak out, but they like, how are we gonna speak out? How are we gonna be able to do this? How are we gonna be able to do that if we have no way to speak out?
Understand. So for the folks online, one of the young adults in the room expressed that young people want to get involved in these challenges and be able to help address and come up with solutions. But she stated also that there needs to be a pathway to make that easy for them. And one of the suggestions, recommendations she made is to create a seat at the table on the boards, on executive committees, on planning teams, and having this intergenerational, right, Romona? We're talking about another project where there would be some intergenerational, opportunities to engage and exchange and learn. So I'm hearing this also here in this work, a need for that intergenerational component as well, Romona. So we need to think about how can we create that pathway for young people to be able to listen to the conversation, then be able to have their space to process, right? And then come up with solutions, right? Because they have
Be
a,
able to voice it to their peers, and once they be able to voice it, then your cycle goes on.
I agree.
Then your cycle goes on, because I'm not saying that, in our community, especially the kids, we have a lot of older people, but we also have the same amount of younger people.
I understand.
as well.
Yep.
And our older people, not saying, Lord,
No, get it.
but our
Yep.
older people are dying off. You
I get
what
it.
I'm
Yep.
saying? And all the information that they have is needed for the younger people, because if y'all dying off, then what we gonna do
I understand.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
how
yeah.
will we survive?
Yeah.
Y'all done took all this information with y'all, and we sit here like, what is there for us to do? You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So without us being knowledgeable and without us having the knowledge, then there's nothing we can do.
I understand. So definitely, Ramona, all of us will have conversations about what is the pathway to get you all's voice, right? Have you in this space so you can listen to kind of like the discussion in the exchange, but then give you your own space, right, as young people to be able to now take that information, take those conversations, digest them, and be able to present them, give solutions, come up with strategies that you can then come back, right, to the older people and present that information and say, hey, this is what we've been thinking about, a potential solution. So I see a lot of synergy there that, and I think all of us, right, gray heads, I'm a gray head too, all of us gray heads, we welcome that. We definitely welcome the young people coming in and wanting a seat at the table. I don't see nobody got their foot on the door, keeping y'all out. We slinging the door wide open for you to come on in, and for you to stake your claim and do this work, because you are right. There's great opportunity for exchange that can go both ways. All right, Albert, I'm about to close out. Oh, you got something on the screen you want to share with the folks?
Well, somebody put in the chat 3 resources.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay. You want to capture that, Albert, so that you can share it out with the participants? Okay, cool. So on historic preservation, okay, nice.
So they shared one for Jackson State, they shared one appears to be for Mississippi State.
Yes,
We shared one for Jackson State, one for
yes. Great resources.
they shared 3. So this digital archive for Jackson State.
Nice. Nice. And Ramona, we may want to think about one of the webinars being a webinar on genealogy or history, how communities can collect that information. Because I think there was definitely a clear expression of interest in that. So I think that is definitely a worthy piece of this work. It's advocacy too, you got to tell your story. Right.
In the least, should be awesome to have in the project.
Right.
And then that could be their project.
It could be their project. Yeah. So cross our fingers we get funded on that project from the Gulf Coast. Yeah, cool. All right, Albert, I'm gonna close out my presentation. I do have a couple more slides.
Thank you for sharing. I don't know who shared it. Oh, wow.
And this was 2 other things.
Oh yeah, that's Dr. McLean's. If you all have an opportunity, Dr. McLean has her 3rd annual Environmental Justice Summit in Atlanta in about 2 weeks. And it's a really good event where communities throughout the Southeast. We helped to develop a 10-year plan, strategic plan. Romona was involved in a lot of that kind of initial planning around what needed to be in that strategic plan, but it's a 10-year strategic plan for the whole Southeast. And for environmental justice and funding and addressing those kind of key issues that come up in our communities: air quality, water quality, infrastructure improvement, et cetera. So that 10-year plan is available. Just let me know if you need that. I can make, well, Ramona, you should have a copy of it, right? Ramona has a copy of that tier plan. But they will be meeting in Atlanta the second week of June.
I think it's June 12th. I'm leaving on the 12th, June 12th through, I'll be there from the 12th through the 15th. I think our panel is on the 15th.
I can't remember. I'm presenting twice doing that summit on Ramona's panel, and then I'm doing a zoning 101. Okay, I'm going to close the loop on this training here with talking about the importance of public comments. So all those advocacy tools that we were discussing play a vital role in how we communicate, right? That information, like I was saying before, it could be shared with the media, it could be shared on social media, it could be shared on your websites, it could be shared with the community. Every time you have a community meeting, you have those infographics, you have that information that is available. Now, you know, just from experience, people are not going to read a text-heavy document. I don't care if it's 1 page, 2 pages, they're just not going to read it. You don't read it. They don't. So knowing that, how can you get the information? You know they need the information, so how do you get it to them? So public comments come in various forms, right? It could be regulatory required public comments. It could be town hall, right? It could be your local school board meeting, right? So there's various ways in which public comments play an important role in being able to advocate for, to address the concerns that you have in your community. Next slide, Aaron.
And can we give it, oh, okay, I see what you're gonna do, public comment opportunities. Exists, and also, I will kind of talk a little bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Curate a little bit about.
Yes, ma'am. So some of those public opportunities exist at the federal level, right? These are your federal agencies, EPA, HUD, your Department of Transportation. All of them, when they have policies, when they have funding decisions, they ask for public comment. Sometimes they even ask people to serve on boards and commissions that they can receive public feedback and public comment, right? So you want to sign up to receive notification from these agencies, particular agencies that you're interested in. Department of Health, CDC, whichever agency that you have affinity for, you want to sign up to receive their information, because they will be sending out when they want public comment on certain aspects of their work. It could be regulatory. It could be we're thinking about changing this rule, and we want public comment on the change that we're making to that rule. So you want to be at the table to be able to do that. Some of it is that you are selected to serve on the committee. NEJAC, right, the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, is a perfect example of everyday common people can have a role and shape the way that EPA addresses policy, funding, decisions that they make within their agency. State agencies, right? Your Department of Health, your local Department of Transportation, they put out notices for comment for public input into their processes as well. Your local government, county, city, town, state, they all have processes for you to express your concerns about ordinances, changes to things that they are, or decisions they're making as their budget, right? Their budget committees, their finance committees, their planning commissions, right? These are opportunities where communities can voice their concerns about what's happening at the local level. And then, of course, your public hearings in town halls, and then your rulemaking and regulatory changes. Those have public comment aspects to them. These are where you can find, right? These are the resources where you can find, or at least sign up to receive notifications of the public, comment opportunities. And Ramona, if you don't mind, you can share this website so that people can have this information. But it's the Federal Registry is one way that you can receive that information. Now, if you're not used to reading the federal registry, it can be confusing to a lot of lay people. So the one that I mostly point people to when they're saying, "Hey, how can I sign up to receive invitation to submit a comment?" It is regulations.gov. On there, you can sign up for their listserv. They have a list. You can search agencies and see what comments are coming up, what different things are listed on this regulations.gov. So it's I find it more user-friendly than the Federal Registry document or website. Your state agencies' websites, you can sign up for their listservs as well to be able to receive, and establishing a relationship with them, right? But a lot of times, how we knew to provide a public comment to a permit or something like that is we had relationships. And those folks would email us, call us, and say, "Hey, this is coming up. I know that this is in your community. I can send you the information so you can get it out," right? So having those relationships, even at the state and local level, a lot of times those folks will get that information out to you. I cannot tell you how important it is to have that similar relationship, that one-on-one relationship with your local government is. I know for a fact, that is how it works with the zoning administrators. Zoning administrators, they know who calls the hell and they know who don't. And those communities and those community presidents, they know that if they don't call them about something that is on a planning commission agenda or on the zoning administrator radar, if they don't give those folks a head up, they know they're gonna catch it, right? So what they do, they call them up and say, "Hey, this may be an issue. So I wanna get from you now your understanding of this," right? That's how a lot of times things happen in our community, and we learn about it the week of the meeting or a couple of days before the hearing, because it was you have a planning commission. You don't have a planning commission. I know you have to have a planning process, right? No, nothing that determines. Okay. Well, we can talk about how the community can get more involved at the town meetings. I'm pretty sure some of those conversations probably come up in those town meetings, right? The town probably can be a little bit more proactive in how they share the information out. Maybe their meetings can be streamed on YouTube to allow people more access to the meeting, or maybe the meeting notes can be shared in the town newsletter that goes out to the So these are just suggestions about how, but we can have some more conversation about how the community can get involved. But for those communities that do have planning commissions, zoning administrators, having those relationships, right, where that zoning administrator will call you up and say, this is coming up on the design review board or the planning commission agenda. That is the relationship you want to have with your local government, even if it's just your community development department, right? I know Duck Hill may not have that.
Well, and not only Duck Hill, but we have to also look at the counties. That's how, the communities, the towns are so small.
Right.
Like, for instance, there is a new bill that's coming up in Duck Hill, right? it would just be really interesting if they even have a building permit.
I hear you. That's a different ball of wax. That's a different ball of wax that we probably can talk, offline about how perhaps you can work with the folks that want to do that development and get them to do it the proper way. So we can talk later, yeah, about that. And then of course, the public announcement in the newspaper, on TV, about various issues that are coming up in your community. Next slide, Albert. So why public comments matter? It influences policies and your decision makers, right? You can sway them based on the number of comments that come back to them. I can tell you how a politician thinks. Each comment that they get, or call that they get, or email that they get translates into 10 voters. That's how they're thinking about it. It translates into 10 voters. So each call, each communication they get, they're thinking in the terms, this is my constituents. So how can you amplify that in your community? If they're thinking in those terms, in those lanes, how can now you amplify that? You can send out a template of an email or a letter or suggested comments they can include when they call, right, their representative. You can have a call script that you can hand folks and tell them and put the information on the call script, right? We have done that. Whoa people out, right? Because they could take a call script. If you tell them what to say, right, people will do it. They will do it.
And the importance of setting the message.
Yep.
Making it concise.
Making it consistent. Yep.
Consistent.
Yep.
For instance, we are, a EF3 tornado hit St. Louis.
Yep.
And I still have strong contacts in St. Louis. And so that tornado came through the north side of St. Louis and basically just floored it. Plus, I still have home in St. Louis.
Right.
So there was damage. But the city of St. Louis is sitting on $800 and something million from their RAM settlement.
Yep.
And then they're still sitting on millions of dollars in ARPA funds that they've not spent. So while I knew everybody was, in panic mode.
Right.
And everything, and traumatized by the storm, and it's massive.
Right.
I saw it as an opportunity to start the messaging.
Yep.
Release the RAM settlement fund.
Yep.
And tag the new mayor.
I understand.
Right? Now, everybody is calling on the
There you go.
of the
That's how it starts.
Everybody
Yep.
is calling on it.
Yep.
Right? So, not having, and I think when we have our next meeting or our next training, this has really been it's always, Brother Omar, very helpful and very impactful, that we can look at overcoming fears.
Sure.
Right? Especially when we haven't been accustomed, some of our communities haven't been accustomed to challenging the system.
Sure.
Right, and understanding this is your constitutional right. When government isn't working for us, then we must make the government work for us.
That's right.
And it's our constitutional duty and our civic duty to do that.
That is correct.
So I just wanted to get that.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. I think just from my experience, this type of training helps, right? Because when people are equipped with the knowledge and the understanding, they're better able to articulate it, right? I tell people this all the time. We meet people where they're at. How they articulate their issues and community concerns. Everybody is not going to speak like a PhD professor. So they will articulate their issues and concerns the best way that they can. They know how to. They have agency. Communities have agency. So, we just have to back them up, give them the training, give them the equipment, give them the resources, and they can do it, right? It's all about empowerment. And this is just a perfect example, right? Today's conversations, today's training around how do you leave communities empowered? Right? Chanel was asking questions earlier to the participants. Those folks knew that information. Right? It's just a testament to the engagement that MCUP has been having with this initiative. Right? Those folks are rattling off the answers. So it's all that leads to I know what I'm talking about. And when you tell me something against what I know is not true, I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to challenge that because I know what you're saying is not right. And that's empowerment. That is empowerment. When you give them the information that is needed for them to now take the ball and run. Right? It's no longer our job to carry the water.
And again, it goes back to we're not in this for money.
That's right.
Because it's just not there.
There's no money there.
Whether there's resources there or not, we don't leave at 5 o'clock.
That's right.
We're in the communities 24/7.
That's right.
So the work has to be done. Right?
That's right.
The upliftment has to be done. The defending has to be done.
That's right. That's right.
And it is, I know when I saw that building coming up, being erected, the first thing that went on my mind, that came to mind was, did they get a building permit?
I understand.
Right?
I get it.
Safety issue.
I get it. I get it.
Why do we have so many buildings that are burning down?
I understand.
In our community?
Yeah.
Why? Because guess what? There's no code enforcement.
I get it. I get it.
There's no building commission. There are no inspectors.
I get it.
And those are systems changes that we have to correct because we want our communities to be what? Healthy. And
thriving. Yep.
Thriving.
Yep.
And sustainable.
There you go.
We have to cut it.
I hear you. I hear you. It also can, what we just been talking about, amplify the community voice.
Amplifying the community voice.
Right? That's why public comments, it matters because it helps to amplify the community voice. Tell that story that otherwise wouldn't be told. Right? Your experience matters in this work.
It sure does.
Next slide, Albert. It increases transparency and accountability. I think we were talking about that earlier, about access to information, access to data, improves the transparency and the accountability. So public comments process, it is required on many of these public agencies to have public comment aspects of their work. It strengthens advocacy and coalition building. That is what MCUP work is here with this initiative, is to develop coalition and build advocacy in this area. Next slide. Okay, we're just gonna look at a couple of case studies. I only got 1 or 2 more slides. Go ahead, Albert. This was, there's 2 processes, right, that can be used, and there's many processes that you can be used, but one of the ones that I see that is used the less, but is one of the most powerful tools out there, and that is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. NEPA. NEPA requires that when federal funds, right, are used for a project, that there is not only public comment that is involved in that process, but the community that is adversely affected by that project can mitigate those impacts. And I was fortunate enough to work with 7 communities actually. That was the first community-led mitigation that used NEPA. To mitigate the impact from a port expansion and an intermodal rail facility expansion adjacent to their communities. And NEPA was around since the 70s. NEPA was not new. It was around since the 70s. But it was never used as a community led mitigation until the communities in the city of North Charleston was able to use it to mitigate adverse impacts in their communities. And together, both of those mitigations with the State Ports Authority, South Carolina State Ports Authority, and with Palmetto Railways, allowed the community to mitigate, to negotiate a total of $8 million. $8 million that the community now uses, right? And I'm no longer with that organization, but that money is still working. So $8 million they were able to negotiate, and they took money, and they have money as revolving loan, where they loan money to small minority businesses that have to locate their businesses in those communities, hire from those communities. They give out educational scholarships. They have established, I think now they have like 8 endowments that they pull interest off, right? So when you're talking about perpetual impact, this is an example, right? And both of those documents there, those are infographics. So that's how we were able to take a very complex mitigation process and give the communities those 2 documents to talk about their $8 million and where it's going. Because ultimately, that's what people want to know. Where's this $8 million going? Right? Is it going to your pocket? No, this is where it's going, right? So it goes to education, housing, economic development, and affordable environment. So out of these funds, we were able to establish our own community research organization that has its own internal review board. So anyone that does research in the community has to go through that organization's internal review board. Right? Because we own the community data, we create the community data, and we tell our own story around that data. So this research group has water quality work that it does in the community. It does flood work, and it does air quality work. And then the LAMSI organization, it does the community revitalization work, the housing, the education improvement, the economic development, and it does a little bit the environmental justice around policy and those types of work. And then the last one I want to talk about is the community benefits agreement. And that was a process. We were able to help a community negotiate with a warehouse that wanted to truck merchandise, materials through the community. Now, the community is working hard to revitalize. And do we want 18-wheelers going through the middle of your economic development corridor? No, you don't. So we were able to create a community benefits agreement that took those trucks, because they were proposing these trucks going through the community. And we were able to help them negotiate putting those truck routes on the other side where the industrial edges of the community exist. So we were able to negotiate the removal of those trucks because it was going to add to air quality concerns, noise concerns, and then of course it was going to have an economic impact on the revitalization efforts of the economic corridor. It was an economic corridor where you have business and you have other type of economic development initiatives going on. They also negotiated stipends, education stipends for the adults in the community, where when that warehouse hire, anyone from the community that puts in an application get priority consideration, right? We can't promise anyone a job, but what we can do is open a door, right? So they will get special consideration for interview. And what the agreement our organization, the Lamsey organization at the time, had with this warehouse is that if there was anyone from the community that was denied a job because they did not have the qualifications, pass that individual off to us, because we have a scholarship for them to go to the local technical school and get whatever qualification, certification, whatever that they needed, and we would pay full ride. Everything that they needed to get that qualification. All of that came out of the mitigation and the community benefits agreement. So together with the $8 million, and I think that community benefits agreement was about $150,000 in incentives, because they partnered with a local school to provide 3 years worth of school uniforms, because this is a low wealth community with single moms. Most folks there are renters; they're not homeowners in that particular community. So they needed that. That was one of the things that they say they needed that assistance was. So that warehouse partnered with the school to provide 3 years worth of uniforms for those students, as well as positive behavior incentives, where those students that were doing well in school, their behavior changed, they were making the grades, they would throw a pizza party for them on a monthly basis. Right? Positive incentives for those students. So those are just examples of how advocacy, right, and making sure that the community voice is at the table, right? That is important, because I'm going to tell you, you're going to have people sitting at your table that's not about community. Because we had a couple of them sitting at the table, trying to identify what was in their best interests, how they could walk away with something. So, you as leaders of your organizations, as leaders of the community, as leaders of these initiatives, you have to know who's in the room, why they're in the room, and how you manage those agendas. How you manage those agendas. But all of this was advocacy tools that we use. All those tools that we talked about, we have used to get to this point where now the community is building houses. They're providing scholarships to their graduating seniors and adults. They're providing business loans to people in the community. They are addressing their environmental challenges themselves. Now the Lamsey organization, we done set this infrastructure up, right? Where the money flows to them, is going to different initiatives. Now the Lamsey organization is thinking, hey, we pretty much have done what we need to do. We need to pivot. We need to pivot, the organization need to pivot to something else. So what the organization is doing now, we're not doing too much community revitalization because we have set up infrastructure for the community to do that. Right? They have their own land trust. They have, that's building their houses. So now we're moving, not me, but the organization now is moving to more resiliency work. Flood mitigation, other types of resiliency work. So that is the work we're doing now.
And we have to know when it's time, like they say, it's a
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you know, they're gonna find some reason not to.
right.
And when it gets to that point where it begins to become a drain and a burden on the organization, then that's a time when that pivoting, that's a sign that it's time to do that pivoting.
Well, not only that, but you build the infrastructure, right? You build the infrastructure, you train them. They're now doing a lot of the advocacy that you used to do, like being in all the city council meetings. You no longer have to do that, right? Because you have trained them now how to speak, how to put together their comment papers, how to put together, you know, the strategy to get people out. Right? Now you don't have to do that because they're doing that now on their own. Yeah, they will. They will. You just have to build that infrastructure. You have to build the infrastructure. Because when I first started doing this work, what I told them is, I don't want to be doing this 25 years from now. The same work, 25 years from now, I'm still talking about community revitalization. You know, if we continue to do that, we're as guilty as the folk we are accusing as pimping our communities. Right? So we have to leave the infrastructure, the knowledge, the information with the community, and they can do what, they can do what they want to with it. That's how I left the Lampsey organization. I was just, burnt out, to be honest with you. I was ready to move on and do something else. Because I had promised myself I wasn't doing this no more than 5 years. Being an ED of an organization is extremely challenging. Because all of the hard work you do, it's a thankless job. And you get reminded more of the things that you ain't doing than the things that you are doing for the community. You get a lot of swift kicks in your behind. Right? But you do it because you care for the community and you want to see better. But this is the last slide, right, Albert? I think it is. It should be. Yep, that's the last slide. Well, yeah, we talked about those. Okay, cool. So that's all I have, Romona, for this training.
This was quite the day. And with Omar, I know it seems like we always say the best for last, right? But with our partners, they support our work, and we want to make sure that we do our due diligence toward them, and our research partners just play such a vital role. One of the things that I wanted to speak to, and I was hoping that you would, was we had briefly talked about the comment period, the comments that we submitted to the Mississippi Department of Health on the IUP, that quick turnaround. But also, I wanted to lift up the role and the support that you gave us when we were challenging the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the EIS, the DEIS. DEIS stands for Draft Environmental Impact Statement. And we worked with 3 communities in Jackson, in Northeast Jackson. The Army Corps of Engineers came in and had been working with these to put together what's called the One Lake Plan. And that period, that comment period, which is so critical and so important, we ended up, first of all, we went into this work that we didn't know anything about. And when I saw what it was, the first person that I called was Brother Omar, because I knew what they had gone through in Charleston and working with the Corps. And because Charleston is a port city, they do have the Corps has a lot of influence in the city of Charleston. And I said, Omar, I'm in over my head. I need some guidance. I need some help. And like he always does, he immediately responded. What we ended up doing was also reached out to another organization called CAES and told our story, and knew that we needed to have a subject matter expert who had experience in hydrology and also in DEIS. And they assigned us a gentleman by the name of Ricardo, who helped to write New York State's flood management plan and program. And we just presented that piece of work this week. This week, I just got back from New Orleans on yesterday, and we just presented the outcomes of that work at the Association of State Flood Management Professionals, and we knocked it out of the park. So what that did was it caused the Army Corps of Engineers, something that they seldom, from what I'm told, that they seldom do, it caused them to step back and reevaluate the DEIS and to reassess their whole approach to community engagement, to the DEIS, and that was in part because there were many other organizations that responded and worked on it through the public comment period. But our public comments were so powerful, we submitted a 48-page public comment, and between Brother Omar, Brother Ricardo, and myself, we pushed it back. So it's just, there's just so much that we want to give if our communities are willing and if they are receiving. We can change things in Mississippi. We really can. We can change, and that's what keeps me in this fight, because I believe wholeheartedly that we can change things in Mississippi. And not only can we change things in Mississippi, we are going to change things in Mississippi. So those of you who have joined us online, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I know it's been a long day. Some have been with us all day. Some came in at various points and sessions that they were interested in. And I just want to say, have a wonderful weekend. I know I am going to be resting for 3 days. So this concludes our quarterly Mississippi Zero Lead and Healthy Housing Solutions quarterly meeting. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to Albert Williams, our IT guy, our multimedia man who keeps us going and everything, to our board chair, Chanel, and also to the wonderful people who are becoming a part and who are helping to form this, this coalition. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh,
Who is that?
it's Laurel.
Hey, Laurel. Oh, girl, hey.
Hey.
Laurel. Is anybody else on? Hold on, Laurel.
Okay.